Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you here. As you know, you can find out more about us on officehours.global. Let's dive into our first question. Mitch, what do we have?
Thank you, Bill. Jacob Goodnight from Indianapolis, Indiana is here with our first question. What are your preferred network monitoring tools, hardware or software, that check internet uplink stability and performance?
Alex?
The one that we use because we manage the network is the router itself. So we use Meraki's, and so in the Meraki environment, it's going to tell us a lot. It's going to give us a lot of that information. And I will admit that I don't have a lot of other ways to do it, but I would make sure that you have a router that's able to give you telemetry back. And so whatever that router is, make sure that, whether it's Ubiquiti or Meraki or other things like that, make sure that that router, there's probably some other solutions, but we found that to be a pretty effective one, is the router actually telling us what's going on from its perspective.
Guy Cochran?
Yeah, I also take a look at, I used to look at speedtest.net, but it doesn't give you as much information as what Cloudflare does. So if you take a look at Cloudflare's offering, it's speed.cloudflare.com. You get not only latency and jitter, but you get packet loss and upload measurements. So it's a little more refined. Try not to do that constantly during a show because you're basically hitting it. But like Alex, I have a hardware Unify router, which tells me you can do some pretty deep level packet inspection. You can see what's hogging. I also like to limit the users on the network so that they can't take all of the bandwidth. So if somebody does hit a speed test in the middle of a show, it doesn't make somebody else drop. So there's things that you could do to do quality of service and keep it so that you have control and it's more fine-tuned. But you really need somebody who knows networks to dive deep into this, because it isn't an overnight thing where you just want to willy-nilly go in there and start changing settings.
Mitchell? Yeah.
I have the Comcast workplace router, and here's the trick. You got to make sure you ask them for customer administration. Otherwise, you're just going to see really basic stuff. But if you get the admin level of permission, you can see a lot of nice graphs that provide interesting information right there on the router if it's a DOCSIS 3 or better.
Alex?
Yeah, and again, to go back to it, I do use speed test, and I also use speed of me to test the bandwidth of a thing, but that's a momentary test. What we do with the routers and the Merakis and so on and so forth is we're looking at it over the whole day, and especially if we see a glitch, we go back and look at, like we see a glitch in the stream. We go back and look at, we can see what the last little bit of time was, and so we can make a decision about, is that something that happened? Or we can just be looking at it. Our network administrator that's going to be on the streaming engineer will typically be watching it the whole time. We have that window open all the time. And so if they see any kind of anomalies, they're looking over to see what the spikes were. And it also just gives us a sense of nominal use of the network. So sometimes if we see suddenly we're using 110 megs a second or something like that, we can figure out, sometimes it's people transferring files, sometimes it's, that type of thing.
Jacob, I hope that helped you out. Let's go to our next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida has a question. What are the most common causes of NDI transmission issues during live events in hotel ballrooms?
Hotel ballrooms. We've all spent a lot of time there. Jeffrey Powers.
So NDI, I'm going to use the classic joke punchline, location, location, location. And this really depends on if you're talking, Andy, if you're talking about a wired or a wireless NDI situation. In both cases, it's still about what you're doing with your cable management, what you're doing with your wireless management. For example, with a wired if you have everything wired, I always try to make my wires go to directions that people don't end up stepping on the wires. So sometimes direct to the router or to the switch is always a good idea. But if you can run along the baseboards, for example, as much as you can, then that helps keep foot traffic from stepping on the cables and causing any type of intermittent problems like that. If you're talking wireless, a lot of times people stuff those wireless routers and the antennas underneath tables and just out of the way so nobody can see them. And that's not good when you've got a whole bunch bunch of heads walking around and a whole bunch of signals going through, and that camera's trying to get as best a direct signal from camera to router as possible. So you want to have those up close or up high, and you also want to have them away from things like the kitchen that can cause some extra interference. So if you can get to the back of the room and away from anything that has some major interference going through it, then you're going to have a better solution when it comes to wireless transmissions going inside the ballroom. If you're talking outside the ballroom, then maybe Alex has a couple of suggestions here.
Alex?
If you're using your own network and you haven't added any major connections to that network, you shouldn't have a problem with any networked solution when it comes to media. The reason you're having problems is that you're using something that's not wired, or that you've attached to other people's networks, but your network should be your own. So if you're on your own, inside of your own routed system, that should be your shell, and everybody else is on the outside shell. Other people that are checking their emails are on the outside of that shell. So you're either on your own VLAN or preferably on your own copper or fiber that is connecting all those devices, whether it's NDI or Dante. You shouldn't be relying on other people's connections. Even if you're doing that, then that's a managed connection between those two things, and you usually are going to be working with a IT provider, not the location, to get from one room to another. If you need to use the infrastructure between two rooms, I'd be very, very careful of that. And you want to see that IT provider that's going to be available if it's a major event.
Guy.
Yeah, as Alex said, you really want to isolate your own network. You shouldn't be on somebody else's network with NDI just because of the way that multicast works in MDNS, because that information may not translate or carry over, and their switches may not have the backplane to support the throughput that you're pushing on it. And then there's a difference between layer 2 and layer 3, and you can get IP conflicts. And the other thing is that sometimes people will use like program out to feed a couple of monitors, and you can quickly overwhelm or saturate. So we'll use like an NDI bridge and let people hit that with NDI HX. And so it's a lighter weight signal that's coming off of a different machine. So that way my main program out is still going to the encoder or somewhere where it needs to be. Just a one-to-one relationship, and the other machines that are picking up for downstage monitors or whatever are able to go to the bridge and hit that as many times as they want, because that'll be a powerful machine that can feed out as an encoder now. It's basically retranslating that feed. The other thing is be careful of Wi-Fi leaking out. You can, with NDI Access Manager, you can say only use this NIC and turn off Wi-Fi. So there's transmission issues that can occur for a variety of reasons, but it really depends on who's running the show and who's mapped it out, who the engineer in charge is, and who's the network technician to isolate these things and check the packets. There's things like Wireshark that you can use an IPsec to look and see what's going on behind the scenes.
I remember when I got to the point in hotel ballroom work where I could just go in the back of the hotel and grab coffee whenever I wanted. I felt like I had finally arrived in that world. Let's go to the next question.
It's Mike Edwards from Brooklyn, New York, asking, morning, everyone. I want to record while streaming in Blackmagic Broadcast and 6K Pros to then upload to Synology NAS. What SSDs, NVMEs, as well as hub ecosystems should I look at to achieve this? OWC, Samsung, not more than an Alex 2, please.
Well, let's start with Chris Fenwick here. Chris?
So, Mike, I believe in Alex. What is an Alex? Is it 300 or 350?
$700.
700. Awesome. Okay, so here's the deal. I don't have all the answers for all the questions that you have, but I just saw an ad for this Glyph hard drive literally just this morning. It's the Atom Pro. You got to get the Pro. They have different ones. This thing is wicked fast, Alex. This is the same speed as the 4ME drive that we buy from OWC. It's 2,800 gigawatts, and they have different sizes. So if you can go up to $700, you can even get the 4 terabyte version. The 800 is going to cost you a little. That's about $1,400, but it's wicked fast. It's 2,800, whatever the next word I would say. The downside is it's a bus powered thing. You can't loop it, that kind of thing. But that's part of the equation that you need.
Alex?
And it really just depends on how much storage. So maybe if you ask this question again or you start to work through it, under 4 terabytes and under is a relatively easy thing to solve exactly the way Chris is showing it. As you go over that, you start spending either more money or you need more storage. So if you're looking at 8 terabytes or 16 terabytes, then other solutions that are probably more than an Alex are probably going to be required.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I'd go a different direction. I would go with the deck just because during a live show, if that camera needs to be fiddled with and it's hot, you're going to jiggle it trying to get a card in or out or whatever. And I can also see from afar if it's recording, which you could do depending on the camera. You can trigger it from an ATEM. But I like the HyperDecks because, especially the newer ones, you can say EXT media. So you could hook up your SSD externally on the back of a HyperDeck, some of the 8K, the 4K HyperDeck Studio Pro. And the other thing is they got 10G on them. So if you like your life, instead of running around worrying about all this media, get some decks, and then you can 10G off the network and just not touch the camera. Because also plugging and unplugging, plugging and plugging every day, after a while, those ports can become, frayed. So it's one of those things where peace of mind, I would go with decks. I'm amazed at how much you can get an AJ Key Pro on eBay for. I just bought another one yesterday for $120 with a 500 gig drive. So even an old AJ Key Pro, run SDI or HDMI into it, and that way you can monitor the record from afar.
Mike, hope that helps you. Let's go to the next question.
David Brady from New York, New York. I have need to generate monthly reports on YouTube and Facebook pages for that Sunday place. What is the easiest script-based way of harvesting the I's, the ones, and O's into easy-to-manipulate data?
Alex.
Yeah, there's definitely a pretty robust API for YouTube. I'm actually less familiar with the APIs related to, I think that you're going to need to use the graph inside of Facebook, which is going to be more complicated. So the APIs inside of YouTube are probably a little bit more straightforward as far as grabbing those. If you're not tying into the Facebook data or the YouTube data, you can also download. I know that for YouTube, there's a lot of ways to download CSVs. They're going to give you data for every event or other things like that. So without any scripts, it's pretty easy to grab a lot of data out of YouTube so that you can analyze what's happened. So whether it's a live event or other events. So you don't need any scripts for that. But look at the API for YouTube. Otherwise, and again, the Facebook one is the YouTube one is more restrictive, but doesn't change very much. The Facebook one is less restrictive, or has been, but changes every day. So it's really much harder to develop for. So I'd think about that one a little bit.
Let's go to our next question.
Next question is coming in from Douglas Carmichael. For Super Bowl, Fox Sports transcoded 2110 to SDI to improve IT security. How would it do so?
Guy Cochran, start us off.
Yeah, the difference with 2110 is you've got an Ethernet cable, and when you have that, it's IP based. So if somebody from the outside, if you were able to figure out that public IP address, you could actually take down the Super Bowl, which would be very bad. When you go to baseband SDI, you're basically, what they mean by security in this article is they're taking the 2110, transferring it to SDI, and then feeding it out to the rest of whoever needs a feed. But that's the security portion of it, is locking it down at a demarc location where it makes this translation, and now people can go ahead and feed the rest of the show. But yeah, being able to take down something via some kind of attack, denial of service, because that thing's publicly exposed, can wreak havoc. And that would be a big win for some hacker to be able to say, I took down the Super Bowl. So that's what they mean by that in the Game Creek article.
I noted the other day, 30-second commercial, $7 million. So you take it down, that's a big economic impact. Alex.
Yeah, it also looks like they were operating, this is from last year, it looks like they were operating this in everything's operating in 2110. It was really the demarc where it's sending it to the NFL, sending it to the rights holders, sending it. So as it goes out of the truck, it gets converted to SDI. And of course, that's where security is going to be the biggest problem. So it doesn't look like they were doing as much conversion. It looks like they were using an EBS, an EBS neuron blade to make that adjustment.
And please remember, your questions do drive the show every day. Not only you're asking the questions in our Mukana interface or through the QR code that pops up occasionally during the show, but also you're voting on those questions determines how quickly we get to them and how much time we spend on each one. So put your questions in, please, regardless of which method you use to do it. But then if you're in the back-end system, please do vote on them so that we know what you're most interested in. Let's go to our next question.
Chris Sabato in Albany, Oregon. I'm rewatching Northern Exposure and the radio DJ uses an SM7 with no windscreen. In the real world, is there a practical reason to not use a windscreen on a mic like that?
Let's start with Mitchell.
Yeah, if you look at a SM7 Shure microphone without the windscreen on, it kind of looks goofy. It looks like an SM57 inside with a cage around it. It's kind of weird looking. But the reason you may or may not want to use it is that, first of all, DJs are meant for doing an awful lot of close miking, and there's going to be a lot of plosives and things like that, and other things flying out of their mouth. So generally, you're going to use a windscreen, particularly in a broadcasting situation where you want to cover that. That's a very popular microphone, especially in the radio days. In fact, Prince and Michael Jackson used it to record a lot of their albums.
Jeffrey Powers.
I think that's where Northern Exposure, that's where SM7 really got its exposure, no pun intended there. I think what they did was they took the windscreen off because they wanted to show that, this is a radio station that doesn't have good stuff, and they're using what they have. And of course, there's no windscreen on there, so they don't do that. You can take a windscreen off, as Mitch said, it's all about plosives. So if you move the microphone in the direction, and if you look at some of the pictures of them using the microphone, it's kind of like what I do is always go to that corner of the mouth rather than going to the center of the mouth. Yeah, you lose a little bit out of it, but then you don't get the P's and the B's or the S's from the windscreen. Plus, I would always, instead of a windscreen, because windscreen's meant for wind, a pop filter is meant for plosives. So if anything, they should have put a pop filter onto the thing, so there'd be some space between the microphone capsule and the mouth, so those P's and B's would have enough time to break apart so you wouldn't get the plosives.
Let's see, Alex.
Yeah, anytime you put something over your mic, you're affecting the sound. So putting even a windscreen on it is going to roll the high frequencies off, and so you're going to want to, if you really want to get everything out of the mic, you want to use the prop. You can see that I clearly have my mic off to one side, and I'm not, and that's going to allow me to have a little bit more of the high frequency than I would have if I put something over it. This one's not built for that, but if I put something over it, you are going to hear the difference.
Chris Fenwick.
I think it is at least feasible, a possibility that they did it just so it didn't block his face for the camera shot. Interesting. It's a TV show more than a radio show. I don't think they were worried about the audio quality from that microphone. They probably did not record his voice on that microphone.
Mitchell.
Yeah, it truly looks unfinished without that windscreen on it. And to Alex's point, I'm using my 414 without the windscreen on it. And that's what it looks like with a $150 AKG foam windscreen for popping.
Interestingly enough, when I got my original mic out of the first studio I ever did a lot of voice work in was an SM5B. In fact, it's sitting on the shelf behind me up there. I don't know if you can see it. It's way up at the top. Anyway, when I pulled the foam off of it one time, I realized that the actual capsule was the same one in the SM7s, the 58s, the 57s. When they designed the original capsule, it was so good that they used it in a lot of form factors. And I think based on what we're talking about here, putting anything between you and a microphone element is going to subtly alter the sound. So everything is kind of built around an original capsule and then what you're going to put on it to make it more useful for more people. And that changed form factor over the course of time does alter the characteristics of the mic a little bit. So every mic I've used, I've had to get to know for a month or so before I feel like I can really use it to the best of my abilities. And I find I perform slightly different depending on what I hear back from the microphone. Just an interesting factor. Thanks for the question, Chris. Let's go on to the next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. How do you measure acoustic quality and provide presenter guidance on Zoom?
Mitchell.
I'm kind of mixed between a quantitative and subjective call on that one because, yeah, you can quantify noise, which is one of the things you'd want to use to measure. Quality of the sound, a little more subjective. Things about the room tone, like the RT60s or getting echo. Those are all things that would go into deciding whether or not you had a good quality audio going into your Zoom.
Alex.
For the most part, yeah, we're listening for it. So we're listening for what it sounds like over Zoom, and you do have to listen to it very carefully. If I'm doing a test with someone, I'm listening to it on good headphones. I'm listening to it directly from my computer, not through anything else, so that I really hear what's going on. And I just listen for what those things are. I'm listening for reflection. I'm listening for what the range is. I'm obviously listening for the volume, listening for pops, listening for breakup from a wireless connection. So those are the kind of things that we're listening for as we go through that. And it's but it's really your ears, and it's really important that they're good.
Jeffrey.
And it also depends on if you're remote or if you are in the room. If you're in the room, it makes things a lot easier. If you're remote and the person is technology inept, they don't want to do things they just want to be on the show. Then that makes it a little bit tougher, and you have to try and do some stuff on the other end to make that work. But if you got somebody that's willing to do a little bit of work, you can do things like if they don't have like chairs to move around or anything like that, you can turn the camera so they're more based towards away from a wall or more towards a corner, a little bit of more separation of the source, finding things that could cause bounce, like anything with glass, pictures or anything like that could be moved around, because that could also help with the lighting and any type of glare that comes out as well. So if they're willing to do a little bit of work and you got a little bit of time, then you can do a little bit of movement to make those sounds a little bit more useful, or not useful, but helpful.
Alex, you want to come back in?
Yeah, and generally it's actually way easier to decide what someone sounds like on Zoom if you're on the other side of Zoom. So you actually don't want to be in the same room with them to try to figure it out. You want to hear them on the other side, because what is Zoom actually doing to them? If they say they do this all the time, then you're going to have to listen twice as hard because most likely it's going to be a really bad audio.
We've all been there. Also, Mickey on the back end here says that there is a thing called STI, Speech Transmission Index. So if you want some objective measure of the quality of at least a vocal performance coming across, you could go down that path. Just do a search on STI, Speech Transmission Index. Let's go to the next question.
Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. There are a few videos circulating showing people driving Teslas wearing Apple Vision Pro. Maybe not a great idea.
Are they accident scenes? Alex, what do you think?
Stunned. A new technology and people doing dumb things with it. I mean, and then putting them on the internet. Like I'm stunned. Like, how could this happen? So I think that it's just dumb people doing dumb things. You just have to remember that not everyone is above average.
Did they get in the back seat at least? Anyway, Jeffrey Powers, you had a thought?
Yeah, this is why I was thinking that we're going to see some either new or addended laws to having the Vision Pro as opposed to like the Google Glass or anything like that. I saw that video, and of course in the TikTok towards the end, the person was getting pulled over by the cops, and they were proud of that. So don't be proud of things like that. That's silly. That's just straight up silly. And you see a lot of stuff. In fact, during the pre-show, a guy pointed me to a new YouTuber that I haven't met yet called Hugh. And he took his Vision Pro onto a plane. He basically wore them for 5 hours. He wore them around the airport and everything like that. So that was a pretty interesting thing. And you're seeing a lot of videos like that. But once again, it's going to be, a couple weeks before we start seeing some really bad news articles about Vision Pro users doing something stupid and maybe even losing their lives. I hope that doesn't happen, but the possibility is there.
This is where I cough and mumble Darwin Awards under my breath. Alex, you had another comment?
Yeah, putting screens right in front of your eyes, there's probably not a lot of laws that need to be made. It's already against the law to drive with any of these types of things. You can't even check your phone, I don't think that there's new laws. I think that you're just going to see dumb people doing things because they're dumb. And then they're like, let's do the cool thing, and there will be a couple Darwin Awards that are applied, but Darwin Awards have been around for a long time.
They have. Mitchell, you wanted to have a last comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that stupidity is self-limiting.
Yeah, it's sad because you hope there's not somebody else involved, but here you go. Let's move on to the next question.
And it's from David Brady in New York, New York. New multifunction room control booth. The integrator is speccing out a Mackie Big Knob Studio Plus for selecting from multiple sources to monitor. Curious if there are similar products in this space. Seems a bit excessive for a simple task.
Mitchell, what do you think?
I think it's a good choice. I think the Big Knob Plus would be good. Also, since they got purchased by Rode, they have a new version called a Mackie Mainstream Live that you may look into. Don't know much about it other than it's just a newer version of that. Other units to look at, the SSL2 Plus, the Apollo Solo, which Bill uses right there. And yesterday we saw the Lewitt Connect 6, which seems very interesting.
Alex.
I think it depends on what are they doing. I mean, I do like the idea of the large knob. You saw the Lewitt have this, the Mackie has this. A large knob that you can kind of reach down and make adjustments, I think is actually kind of useful. But I don't know what they're going to do with it. And for me, if I'm doing an interface, for me, the big factor is, does it have something like noise assist? What does the noise reduction look like? Because that, for me, it's become the most important part of my interface is understanding that. But it would depend on how many sources and what they're trying to control and how often they're going to really need to change it.
Yeah, I've been surprised since I got the Universal Audio Apollo Solo here. I thought, and I've mentioned this before on the show, I thought that it was a really simple interface that I'll have a big knob and maybe 5 buttons on the bottom. It turned out it was much less simple than I thought because below the surface, there's a ton of routing circuitry and options and menus that you can go in and do much more complex tasks than a simple big knob in front of you that just, for example, takes care of your volume. So sometimes you have to look beneath the surface. It's really interesting how many things they can allow something that looks this simple and functions once you get it set up very simply to be able to do. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael asking, what streaming pipeline would you use to stream live spatial video content to the Vision Pro or MetaQuest? Could Mimo Live or a similar product handle it?
Alex.
Yeah, so the MetaQuest and the Vision Pro take two different pipelines. So the MetaQuest is doing a side-by-side encode. The Vision Pro is using HVEC, and basically there is no way that we know of right now to stream live in that format. Everybody's working on it. It's just a little ahead of what's going on. So streaming live to the Vision Pro is not happening yet. We do expect it to happen over the next 3 to 4 months, but it's going to require a very different kind of encoding because the way that format works is not just a simple side-by-side. It is taking a hero eye, which is typically the left eye, and it is encoding the delta between of that hero eye to the right eye, and so it's figuring that out. It's what the advantage of that format is that it will pass through a lot of things like Final Cut and everything else. You just treat it like 2D, and if you're delivering it to a device with 2D, it'll just show you 2D. And if you're delivering a device with 3D, it'll be able to deliver the 3D data. And so it's a very efficient format and a very portable format, but it's not a format that the encoders right now and any of the software is built to send yet. So we should expect that a lot of news in this area over the next 3 to 4 months. So we know that everything's working on it. Apple did white papers on it, but it's not there yet.
And if you're interested in this subject, our second hour today, we're lucky Matthew Cimaglia is going to be back in today, and he is an Apple developer, and they are working in this field. So if you have questions about MVHEVC or other things along those lines, you found yourself in the right place on the right day. Let's move on to the next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois, wanting to create a Zoom Room appliance using a Mac Mini. Can I connect a touch monitor for control using Mac iOS?
Guy Cochran.
If you're using a Mac, it depends on if it's the M1 version. Macs aren't, the OS isn't built for touch screens. I would actually use an Intel version if you could and run Basecamp on it. And the Windows operating system fully supports touchscreen on Zoom Rooms. And you even can tell it that as you install it. So the alternate way is if it is an M1 based Mac is every Zoom room can have a controller, and you can say use iPad as a controller. So if you have a spare, even an ancient iPad will work. Is you just load the Zoom room controller software, and that's your touch screen. So those would be the ways to do it.
Alex.
Yeah, and a lot of monitors have their own touchscreen drivers inside of the monitor, and so you just plug their USB in, and they just act like a mouse. So you should be able to get monitors that are simply giving XY data to the computer, and I've definitely used lots of those with Macs and with not any problem at all. So that doesn't require anything on the computer side to drive the monitor. The monitor just is delivering XY through a USB as if it was a mouse. So that's what you're looking for is something that will do that.
Nice. Next question.
From Ketil Fla Josvold from Tromsø. If you had the opportunity to design an optimal live stream green screen studio, what aspects would you focus on the most?
Jeffrey Powers, start us off here.
Well, first of all, it depends on if you're talking a one-wall green screen or if you're talking a whole room green screen. The biggest one is always going to be lighting. Make sure that you have not only the ability to light the back, ability to light the front so you don't have a lot of shadows, but also the ability to move around the lighting. So if you need to get very specific in what you're doing, then you can light the subject or product that way. The next thing would be a nice in your green screen having the proper colors that don't cause any type of reflection or don't have any blue or red into it. That way you don't get as much of the being able to switch back and forth, so you could have a decent green screen from there. And then I would even think about making it more of an infinity wall style. So if you have to point the cameras down, you can have that small curve that's in the wall, so it doesn't look like you have any corners. Once again, creating shadows.
Alex.
Yeah, like Jeffrey said, you got to decide how many walls you want to cover. So that you basically you're not going to do typically all the walls. You're going to do 1, 2, or 3. So if you have, 1, that's usually what we use for an insert studio or stand-ups. In fact, for stuff like MacBreak for a long time, we used 1. Of course, you can have 2 or 3 walls there. Now, one of the things you want to think about as you start to do it is, number one, is how big is the space? You want to make sure that your subjects are capable of being at least 4 feet, about a little over a meter away from the walls. So think about how you can back up. Like, I want a workspace here. I need to be at least a meter away, if not more, away from them. So that's going to extend this. That's going to start driving the size of your space about what you're doing there. It's very, very hard to light them separately and to not have drop shadows and all kinds of other things on that background if you start getting closer to the background than that. So it's not really sustainable if you're really building this out. The other thing you're going to think about is that curve. The typical curve on a green screen is about a meter, 36 inches. So that's going to be the curve that you have here. So that's going to also take time. This is a 36-inch curve. That's also going to take space away from you as you start to do this process. Now, you can get 18-inch curves. The problem with the 18-inch curves is that they curve really fast, and you end up with a shadow against them. So the 36-inch ones, there's really nice ones that are 5 foot. They're like almost 2 meter curves. Those are really nice, but they take up a lot of space. And so you want to think about those curves there. And the other thing is, if you're going to do a U or an L, you have to think about spill management. So the other thing you're going to have is you have curtains. You want to have a rolling curtains. We use Rose brand in the United States, but you can probably find them other places. And you're going to have tracks that are going to go around that. So you build tracks here that you can move these. I usually like to set them at what we call 100% fullness, which means that they're going to have a lot of wrinkles to them. They're not going to be flat, and the reason for that is that they also act as a great way to knock down reflection. You've got a lot of hard surfaces, and you want to knock those reflections down. So as you pull these back, they're going to build up a lot of fullness there, so that you can kind of make it 50% fullness will also work if you're going to push them there, and you're going to want a place for them to go, so that so you need to have an extra track here and a little bit of a long area. So that's one of the things you want to think about there. And then from your lighting, you're going to want to put a grid into these things. It's not going to be trying to put lights up or hang them or whatever. So typically we use a 3x3 grid. or a 1 meter grid that you'd have here. That way you can hang the lights from there. Large sources are going to be better than small sources because those are going to allow you to have that kind of soft area. I tune these all through scopes, so I'm looking at them through scopes. I'm trying to even out that all the way around the process there. If you have this U, make sure that it goes longer there. The other thing is that you can get interlocking exercise mats and get really big ones, and you put them on there on the floor. Generally, if you're not using the floor, always put something on top of them so you're not adding scratches to it. And it also, so you want to keep that floor as pristine as you can. You also are avoiding having a lot of sound. You're having a lot of green spill coming up from the floor. So black across that bottom is really important. And then finally, if you're doing the green, I only use composite component green. But you can try to use Roscoe green or whatever. Roscoe's got a little more blue in it than the digital green from Composite Components. Big fan of it. What I do to do that is the only way I build screens at this point is I go through ProPsych, which we've used all over the world. They build all those curves. Do not try to build them yourself. Like you will think that you can. You cannot. Go to ProPsych, order the core. They come as separate pieces, and they're modular. And you put them in, and then what happens is you affix them to the frames, and then you just spackle in between them and smooth that out. And then you start adding layers. And what I do is I add 2 layers of primer. Then I add 2 layers of green. I literally take the digital green screen, I take it to the hardware store, and I have them make exactly the same color. It's not the same green, but it's very, very close. And I'll put 2 more layers of that on, and then I put 2 layers so it's like 6 layers. It takes like a week for us to paint these. But they end up super smooth because smoothness is really important because you've got lights coming down at an angle, and you'll see any kind of crack that you have across that piece there. So those are some of the basics of throwing one of these green screens together. You can also order, it just depends on, again, whether you're doing how many walls that you're actually doing there. As you add walls, it will get harder. I would recommend, unless you really know what you're doing, don't build a U. Build an L or build a flat there. And of course, if you're not showing people's feet, you don't need a curve at the bottom. I mean, you can literally just paint a wall green if you're not going to show anybody's feet, and so that's another option that you can take a look at. But those are some of the kind of the quick tips on approaching a green screen.
There's your compressed masterclass in green screen for today. The Guy Cochran has an ad on that.
Yeah, for those of you that were in after hours, I think it was last week, I visited a studio in Seattle, and they said they were the quietest studio in Seattle. So sound is my number one, is how quiet is it. So I've rented a couple studios that huge monsters, super nice, catering, everything, kitchen, makeup rooms, fancy, everything looked great. But then it sounded like garbage, and we had to bring in a third internet. So that was the thing is if you're live streaming, how is their internet? Run some speed tests a couple days in advance. And if you have to, call up Comcast or your local provider and see how much it is to drop in a line. The big thing is power, of course. Do they have enough power to run all your lights and equipment? And then cooling. Can you get that place cooled down quick if you have to? Luckily in the Northwest here, we can pop open the bay doors. And that's the other thing is load in and load out. Can you drive a truck in and get out of the rain, or is there a loading dock? It depends on what you're bringing in and out. And then could you just rent another studio? Because the studio that we'll be touring, hopefully, if you guys thumbs up the thing in Discord as a second hour, those guys are receptive to letting us tour the place again in more of a formal manner. And that way we could see just a little more behind the scenes, because there are some interesting things that they're doing. We talk about green screen. They're looking at Socially You and replicating the 5 Ultimat solution with Unreal. So if you go to the link that I put in the chat there, you'll see what I'm talking about. 5 Ultimats with Unreal. So that's a thing now, is people want to be able to do multiple cameras and move the cameras in space and have the Unreal background move. So there's a lot of considerations when you're looking at these studios and buying versus renting, because even something is like what 090 had with 3210, that pyrotechnic stuff, being able to get that smoke out of there quick. Some of the stuff you can't get anymore. So these old studios have like massive sound dampening, massive power. All that infrastructure was paid for long ago. So if you could just rent something or find somebody that's already got a studio, it might be better to do that or partner up with somebody than starting from scratch.
Having turned a hay barn into a studio some years back, I support everything that's been said here. It is more complex than you think. It's great that you're asking people for suggestions and things like that. And one of Guy's points that he made, HVAC, and having something that'll handle keeping that well-insulated space hot or cool, or at least being able to vent it, was very important. I was in Scottsdale, Arizona, so it's stupid hot in the summertime, and to have a good HVAC system that would exchange the air in the studio became a primary consideration. I spent a lot of money on a big split system in order to do that. Money incredibly well spent. Let's move on to the next question.
And it's from Dave Brady in New York, New York. With OS 10, is there a way to set the copy-paste function of text to plain text by default?
Chris Fenwick.
Possibly, Mr. Brady. One of the things that I deal with a lot is copying stuff out of whatever into Keynote. What I do in Keynote is there's an extra keyboard shortcut called paste and match style. So if you copy out of like a Word document or a Pages document and you just paste straight into Keynote, it's exactly the way it looked in the other document. So what you want to do, and I can't remember what it is, it's 17 keys all at once, paste and match style. Whether or not you can do it in all apps, I don't know. OS level, I don't know. But look for paste and match style.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, I don't think that there is, but Command T is I use all the time. So I convert things to plain text all the time to just rip everything else out of it. And so Command V, Command T is how I do it. It's not automatic, but it's pretty fast. so.
And sometimes what I'll do is I'll open up a second document that's just a plain text thing, and I'll copy out of one, paste in there. It's already selected, copy again, go back into wherever I'm going and paste in. Yep. It's a hack, but
David, hopefully that helps you. Let's move on to our next question.
From Dan Shaw in Columbus, Ohio. Curious if the panel has any recommendations on a cloud service that helps with collaboration during the video editing process. An example would be showing the client the rough cut video and allowing for comments on changes they would like to see.
I wonder if that might be interesting to talk about in our second hour today. But right now, Alex Lindsay's going to take on.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to seeing what Alteon provides in that area. For most of us and for most of the industry right now, the standard is Frame.io, which is owned by Adobe. And so a lot of people that is what we see used all the time. It's what I use a lot as well. Definitely looking for other options and how other things look, and especially if they're supporting other formats. But the one that has been used for the most part for the last 5 years has been Frame.io.
Let's move on to the next question.
And it's from Mark Giuliani in Washington, D.C. I learned in office hours when Alex Lindsay and Chris Fenwick used transparent shapes for Keynote graphics. Can this be done with a camera feed in a Zoom meeting behind a transparent shape if you have 2 Macs and an A10? 1 Mac for the Keynote and 1 Mac for the Zoom meeting.
Alex?
Yeah, the transparency is being created by we're using Luma keying. So we're just simply Luma keying. I don't know what Chris is doing, but I can tell you what I'm doing is doing a Luma key. So basically what you do, I don't have a way to set that up kind of during the show, but essentially you're putting your object on. You got to make sure your object doesn't have any blacks in it, because you're going to go and I'm going to key the black out in my scene, and then my objects will just show up as regular objects with transparency from Keynote. So you set that up as your downstream key. So you feed that in, and you feed you feed the Keynote in as your key and your fill into the downstream key, and then you do a Luma key on the same image. The way to do if you go into your graphics and you want to make sure there's no blacks, you just sit there and you just make the contrast just 3%, 2% or 3% less, and it'll pull the blacks up in a way that you no longer will they're no longer keyable if you do it delicately. And that's all you got to do. And no one's going to notice that you pulled the blacks up a little bit. It's going to bring them up from a broadcast perspective. It's going to bring them up about 15%.
Thank you. Let's go on to our next question.
Miguel Fernandez from Phoenix, Arizona. Vision Pro. What feature about the Vision Pro is the sleeper hit, and what feature has surprised you with its utility?
Well, the person we know on the panel who's had it for the longest is Alex Lindsay. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, so I would say that the sleeper hit is the fact that it's connected to the rest of your ecosystem. So the fact that I can sit there and respond to texts and quickly FaceTime somebody and then go back to what I was doing and having all those things all built into it, that's what really makes it immersive for me anyway. The feature that is, I wouldn't say surprised me, but is the standout feature is if you look at Jig Space, which is available on the web, being able to build step-by-steps easily to show you how an object gets put together or how it gets pulled apart or how a process works. What they've done is they've built a pipeline. You can load your objects in and then animate them from place to place, but also you can add audio annotation and video annotation. And inside of JigSpace, you can just take your hand and just draw circles in 3D around parts of the object. And one of the next things they're working on is being able to have collaboration. So you'll be able to jump in there with somebody else and do the same thing and open up the same model. That's going to have a huge impact on how people use the headsets. As far as how to learn, I can definitely see myself opening that eventually and opening up the IKEA app and figuring out how to build the desk, without losing all the, leaving a bunch of screws left over.
It's going to be interesting to see how this new technology develops. Let's head off into our next question.
From Dennis Champion Walker in Radcliffe-on-Trent, United Kingdom, I'm rebuilding my Stream Deck pages in Companion and have just hit a snag. Using Keyboard Maestro to run keyboard shortcuts and launch apps, but trying to launch MixFX Pro, it launches Fantastical instead. Everything else works fine. Any ideas?
Jeffrey Powers, do you have some help for him?
My guess is it's a hotkey Fantastical. I'm assuming you're talking about that calendar app for Mac. I don't see a companion addition for Fantastical. So whatever's happening has to be happening outside of Companion. So most likely what's happening is with MixEffect, you're pressing a button. Fantastical is sharing the same command structure for that button press, and therefore it's taking advantage on that. I have the same problem with a PC with the NVIDIA streaming stuff. Every now and then I'll press a button, all of a sudden says, "Are you trying to stream?" Press Alt-Z to do that, and you have to go into the settings and turn it off. I would turn it off. I would in Fantastical, I would even try and change some of the hotkeys if you can to see if that will help fix the problem.
Dennis, hopefully that helps you out. Let's go to our next question.
And it's Chuck Hodges from Tuolumne, California. Met Saturday's show having no audio stream when I asked Mukana YouTube showing video not available. Included as weekend issue because Sunday doesn't have audio and video streams. Troubled too. Answering only about Sunday didn't help me with the hows.
Alex, can you help him out?
I'm trying to piece this one together. This was a follow-up from another one, and we probably won't answer these generally during the week. This is usually a Sunday conversation, but because it doesn't sound like you're actually in the Sunday stream, I'll answer it here. We're streaming to YouTube every day. That's what we guarantee, and so 6 days a week it goes up on, and it starts on time. And that's where you can find us. As far as audio streams and other things like that, those are experimental. So we have an experimental radio app, we have an experimental stream, and sometimes they'll work and sometimes they won't. And so that's so you just need to know that we're still working on those tools, but you should not assume that those are guarantees. What you should be guaranteed is that if you go to our channel and you look for the newest live stream in the morning, you're going to see a stream. And I don't think we've missed that for years. So if Monday through Saturday. So that's what you can expect. Anything outside of that is gravy.
Let's go on to the next question.
Kjetil Gjersvold and Tromsø, can you use the Vision Pro Virtual Mac Display feature on Mac Studios, Mac Mini, or just the laptops?
Alex.
Yeah, all the computers. You just have to look at them. They do have to have the newest operating system, Sonoma, on them, but all the computers will show up, and you look at them and say, I want to add this one, or you can say, I want to add it, but you can add only one computer at a time and one screen from that computer at a time, but you can add Mac Minis and Mac Studios.
Let's go to the next question.
Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Can the Vision Pro playback HDR Dolby Vision videos, and if so, how does it look?
Alex?
Yes, and it looks amazing. It looks better than my home screen on my home TV, which is a pretty good TV. I would sit around watching videos. I still watch videos with my family to be social, and so I'm there. I would never watch my TV at home again, thinking that I was going to get a better experience than the headset. It is a kind of frightening thing that, and for those of us who are both nearsighted and farsighted, I've been told I'm not the only one. I actually see the interface and the movies better inside the headset than I see them in real life because of there's a lot of us in this certain age where we're nearsighted and we're going farsighted, and in that environment, the headset, for whatever reason, and I'm not the only one. I talked to somebody else about it, is actually a better experience than the real world when it comes to watching these movies.
That's interesting. When I read the other day that what's the resolution? It's like 3350 per inch, pixels per inch. That's an amazing density.
I find myself watching movies in there, and they have great little theaters that you can put in. It is important to put a virtual theater or a virtual still in there because you'll notice that 24 frames per second stinks when it's against 90 frames a second in your background. So when you put a theater environment behind it, you don't notice it because it's fixed. But it really feels like 24 frames a second is painful to watch inside of an AR experience because everything around it is running at 90 frames a second and it's 24 frames a second and it just looks really framey. It's probably going to be the slow end of that format over the next 10 years because the high frame rate is definitely coming.
Interesting. Mitchell.
I just had an epiphany, and that is I recently spent $4,000 on a new Sony OLED display, and I could have bought the Vision Pro. So my question, Alex, I'm single, so I don't have to worry about the social aspects. Can it replace your TV set in your room?
It already has. Like I don't think about the only reason that I'm going back to my TV is because I want to hang out with my family or I want to watch YouTube TV because YouTube TV doesn't lock into my headset yet. It's asking for a code that I don't have in the headset. But as soon as YouTube TV's there, when my family has gone away for the day or everyone's doing their own thing, I just light up the headset and watch whatever I'm going to watch. I don't have any I don't feel the need to go into my space to watch that anymore. And it annoys the family a lot less because I have a tendency to listen to everything really loud. so anyway, so I just put my AirPod Maxes on and I'm off to the races.
Chris Fenwick.
So it's a social thing. Just curious, I know this is a little off topic, but it is Vision Pro. Did y'all figure out how to change your virtual background in your persona? Because I've seen other people that don't have the backgrounds that I've seen you guys use.
I haven't tried. I just don't care. Like I'll use that persona so little. Like I just don't think that I really don't like the persona that much, and so I don't like it that much. I would use it involuntarily. Like I would use it if I jump into a FaceTime call with somebody and I want to talk to them, and it's kind of there. I don't like the way it looks or the way it moves. It just bothers me, and so I probably would not use that heavily. So I like a lot about the Vision Pro. The persona bothers me a lot.
My request would be that if you go back to the first year of office hours, the background that you used from your living room with your rack in the background,
see if I can get it in there.
That should be your background.
I'll see if I can find it. I don't even know where that is.
Let's go to the next question.
A. Barrera from Flowery Branch wants to know, if I decide to get a Vision Pro, will buying the smallest hard disk space option be a problem in the future, or should I get one with the biggest hard drive option?
Ooh, tough question. Alex, what do you find?
It depends on how much you fly. So I think that you probably wouldn't need it that much I would probably get the middle. I would never get the smallest version. But if you're flying a lot, you're going to want to download a bunch of movies and download a bunch of things that you want to look at into your headset. You're not going to want to depend on the local. So if you're flying a lot or you're moving around a lot or you think that you won't have connections or you're still going to want to watch things, then you're going to want a lot of storage. Otherwise, I don't think you probably will need a ton.
Is the codec pretty efficient that they're using? I mean, that's a lot of pixels.
It's efficient, but it's still big. I mean, again, you can fill up, every movie is going to be 5 to 6 gigabytes or whatever. So it just, you can fill things up if you want a lot of travel. So I got the largest one. I probably went overboard. You could probably get the middle one. I probably would not get the smallest one.
Interesting. Well, I wonder if it's going to follow no matter how much storage you've got, you're going to run out in 3 or 4 months.
I don't do that. I don't have that problem with my phones. I mean, I never run out of space on my phones. I run out of space on my computer all the time.
Computers, yeah. Interesting. Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael is here with a question. Disney is investing US $1.5 billion in Epic Games. Could this mean Unreal Engine gets paywalled in the future?
Ooh, big question. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Not likely. I think that what Disney figured out is that we're going to use this platform a lot. We're going to add a lot of value to this platform, and so we want something for that. And so instead of just spending money with Epic, they bought into Epic and invested in it. Epic also needed the money because the Fortnite income has dropped. So it was a good mix of the two. So I think it had more to do with, I think Disney realized if we're bringing all these assets to Epic, it's going to be worth a lot of money. Let's get a percentage of it.
Yeah, I will mention this. So I was doing some media placement the other day, and I was responsible for a piece of content that had to go on Hulu, which is now part of Disney. And it was interesting to me, the specs had changed, and I had to deliver a much higher quality raster than I had on the material that I presented for them before. I wonder if they're really going to head toward this quality thing, and if their integration of Unreal Engine is part of this idea of migrating the entire Disney and ABC and the rest of that network into higher and higher quality as time goes on. I have no insider information. I'm just saying it was interesting that they asked for a much less compressed, much higher raster quality than they had before from me this last go-round. So we'll see. Next question.
Dennis Champion Walker from Radcliffe-on-Trent, UK. What does it mean when the external display of the Vision Pro pulses white?
Jeffrey Powers.
At first, I thought it was a power saving mode for the outward video, but doing a little bit of reading on this, I found that it's actually telling you that the headset is recording or taking a picture in some way. They say that a pulsing red is when you're recording spatial video, and when you're taking a photo, you'll see a pulsing white come from there.
Interesting. So it's got some feedback to the people on the outside as to what's going on. Let's go to the next question.
Kjetil Flau Gilswald from Tromsø. We all know presenters are notorious for handing in their keynotes at the very last minute. How do you politely refuse to accept them when it's actually too late to implement them into the production?
Oh, tough question. Alex, how do you handle this?
Usually, I learned this actually from Apple. I spoke at WWDC in 2007 or something like that. Meetings ahead of time to review the deck. So, hey, we're going to review the deck the week before. Or we're going to review the deck 2 weeks before. In Apple's case, it was we're going to review the deck 8 weeks before. But so a couple meetings to review the decks, I think, usually makes a big difference in that area. Especially the real question is, do you have to integrate them? Do you have to fix them before they go in? But note that even large companies oftentimes are revising those decks with only during the show. Like there's a team sitting there working on those decks during the show. So it's really less about telling them you can't do it and more about saying, working with a client and saying, if you want us to be able to do that, we need an extra person or 2 people or whatever that are going to be managing those decks. But typically when we have decks that are coming in from speakers, we have 1 or 2, as many as 4 people that are just there to manage the decks. And it depends on how many decks and how often they're being shown and everything else. And what they're doing is they're coming in, they're conforming them, they're making sure that they work for what we're doing. But oftentimes we're getting them sometimes hours before the show. Sometimes they just walk in and they want to run them. We tend to resist that a little bit.
Next. Chris Fenwick wanted to get in on this. Chris?
I was going to say there's a huge trend for extreme resolution screens, things that are way outside the typical thing that I'm going to, whip up on my PowerPoint. And I think that trend has made it a little bit easier for this. But if you're running just a standard screen, there's always going to be people that are going to just waltz in and say, here's my memory stick, or, can I plug in my laptop? Sometimes you can't say no.
Yeah, those things happen. Guy Cochran.
Yeah, you get 2 ends of the spectrum. One is the Apple style where it's well rehearsed or weeks ahead of time, TED Talks and things like that. What we've had recently is where we just said shared PowerPoint from the client and they can update because they have winners in this drawing. And so those were getting handed to us hours before the show and we're kind of freaking out. So we just said, hey, if you could take full responsibility, it's all on you if something happens to that slide, and let them just take full control in the PowerPoint shared. So you can do that with the Windows version. You can say shared version, and that way they can update those things in real time, and we're just hitting the button to the next slide, but they're 100% responsible. But it's definitely communicated who is ultimately responsible in case they put something up there that's misspelled or if something crashes because it's on their end.
Yeah, I didn't think about things like drawings and things like that, but you're right. Those are impossible to do ahead of time. So interesting approach. Hopefully that helped. Well, we are about to head into our second hour. I have a couple of announcements here. We're really looking forward to Matt Cimaglia coming in and talking to us a little bit about what they're doing with Vision Pro and other things from Alteon. But also the MIMO workshop, Oliver and Alex, Sunday, February 11th. If you're interested in MIMO Live, one of the processes that we talk about a lot here in terms of getting things out onto live broadcast, Alex is going to be working with Oliver Breidenbach to improve the workflow of the Gray Matter show. So it's kind of a watch them actually go through and use the software. Also, don't forget After Hours events. The Isadora Lab always happens right after this show on Thursdays, so that's something else to take care of. And remember, if you want to get more involved with the Office Hours community, your first port of call should always be to seek out the Join Us tab on officehours.global. If you fill out the card there, that's going to put you on the Office Hours email list, and that's kind of your first step into getting more involved with the show. Hopefully you want to, because this is so much fun to do every day. We'll be right back. Welcome to Office Hours' second hour today with all the buzz about Apple's Vision Pro. It seemed like a great time to have our next guest back for another second hour. Matt Cimaglia of Alteon.io has been working as an Apple developer to explore how this new spatial content system might develop to help people take maximum advantage of the new platform. The Alteon cloud system lets you upload, index, and kind of share and generally work on the types of augmented reality content you're likely to be shooting, particularly as smartphones like iPhones and similar devices continue to evolve. So with that, overall, Matt, good to see you again. How have you been?
Hi, guys. Thank you so much again for having me on.
Hey, happy always to have you here. This is really since the release of Vision Pro, and I know you'd been saying that as a developer, it's been on your radar for a little while. This is a potential big shift in how people are going to use your service and other services like it. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your experience has been like?
Well, I want to correct Alex on the size that you need for a Vision Pro. I would say get the lowest size so that you can store all your content in Alteon. So I would just kind of throw that out there. As long as you have cloud, just go ahead and get a big Alteon account, store all your content there, and then you'll be set.
Point taken. Point taken.
So
just a general plug there, right? Just subtle.
As a developer, tell us a little about your journey. When did you first get this on your radar, and how have you had to switch your thinking into this kind of new spatial world?
I think largely, speculative. We've had it on our radar for quite some time. One of the things that we announced last year, actually the day of the release of the Vision Pro, was USDZ support. And I think I was actually on this program shortly thereafter talking about, 3D objects and 3D object support. And we were really proud about the fact that, that was part of the workflow that we were building in. The thing that we were really excited about was once Apple released spatial video on iPhone for developers and everything else, we actually developed that and had that infused in our platform as well. So if you guys see my screen, I don't know if there's a way of switching over to that. I have some sort of spatial video testing. We have a DP actually in Hawaii that's shooting some content for us. But what's really cool about it is when I go into this content, you can see immediately at the top, I've got spatial video button here. So if you're watching this on a Vision Pro, the idea would be that I would click this button, and now instead of seeing the dominant left eye, I'm now seeing everything in true spatial video straight from Alteon. The thing that I kind of joke about sometimes too is when you look at the UI, they clearly ripped us off, right? Because we've got this nav bar over here. So I have a bone to pick with somebody over at the design team at Apple for ripping us off. But this is how you kind of navigate around Alteon. But I think it's so incredible. I mean, I obviously have been using it quite a bit, and this is my own personal Alteon account right now. And what's been fun for me is I've been storing a lot of personal videos. So I went to Vienna over Christmas break. A friend's birthday. Things like that. The quality is so phenomenal. Even just shooting on iPhone, it's just mind blowing. And when you're, obviously watching it, and Alex, I'm sure you can attest to this as well. I mean, it's spectacular. I think that there's a new grammar, though, that has to be established for how you're shooting spatial video. It's not your typical cuts. It's not your, I can't do 1 second jump cuts here and there because basically everyone's going to start throwing up. I think it takes roughly about 5 seconds to really have your brain contextually switch to what environment you're in. So, that's just been some of my testing. But, this is something that I've been personally involved in for probably 10 years when it comes to VR and 360 video. I just recently posted something on LinkedIn and through also RedShark that I pitched this concept of VR to the Today Show in 2015. And I remember walking into a room with a lot of the executives and the tech folks there. And I mean, I might as well have been from Mars. What I was telling them, and I at the time, I had a Google Cardboard with me, and I showed them, I think it was like the iPhone 5 or something, or 6, whatever that was at that time period. And it was kind of crunchy video, right? It wasn't the quality that we're seeing today, but it was still showing you that immersive experience. So I personally was incredibly excited when Apple finally did release the Vision Pro.
Is your personal workflow generally you start by shooting on an iPhone and then up to the cloud, and then what's your editorial process, or is there one at this point?
Yeah, so the great thing when I was in Vienna actually was I was concerned about storage, quite frankly, and on my iPhone. And so what I would do is I would shoot throughout the day, and then again, short little plug here, I would then use the Alteon app to upload that content when I got back to the hotel using the Wi-Fi, because it was a more stable connection. As you're roaming around wherever, it's kind of hard to do until 5G really starts to become available and what it's supposed to do. But yeah, my workflow was shoot on iPhone, upload to the cloud, and then when I got home, I had everything. And so I've been able to kind of pull some content down and watch it.
And are you doing any editing of spatial video? Is that even a thing yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so we'll keep our fingers crossed that editorial tools will be coming.
Yeah, we're excited for that to hopefully happen.
Yeah, well, and this is a developing ecosystem that we're there. Talk a little bit about iPad and your implementation there. Is that what people would typically use to kind of look through their libraries on Alteon and figure out what assets they have, what they need, and where they're going?
Look, I think it's user preference, right? I don't think that there's any one device. I think it's more around if you like to use iPad, iPhone, your desktop. I mean, I personally end up using the desktop all the time because I have Premiere or Final Cut Pro on my desktop. So that's kind of how I feel like I'm in my workstation, and that's how I have everything accessible within Alteon. Also, just that real estate size, right? I have a very large display, so I'm able to sort of have everything open and out when I'm looking at any of the content.
Perfect. Alex, you've been playing with this a little bit. Any questions?
Well, a couple questions. One is when you said you had a DP that's shooting some stuff, are they shooting with the phone, or are they shooting with other devices for VR right now?
We've been testing with the phone because we wanted to keep it as native as possible through the Apple ecosystem. Yeah,
because one of the things we're really, and I guess the question is, are you looking at how you're going to support spaces? So a lot of us are, right now the phone is giving us an object that we have as 16 by 9, but what I'll be shooting next week is using, dual 180, and then being able to look at that. And so are you kind of figuring out how you're going to display dual 180 content inside of your product?
Yeah, I mean, this is a debate that we constantly keep having. And I think that one of the things is, like, do you show the left eye, right eye, right? Do you show in different spaces for that? So this is a debate that we keep having. What we've kind of opted to as a default is just let's show one eye. Let's keep it almost flattened if you wanna call it that, and that's how we've been displaying video for the spatial content that we've been testing for quite some time.
And that's relatively easy, right? Because that's the way that the MV HEVC is built, right? It's built to show you one eye when there's only one eye, when you only have a display. I think that for us, or for me, what I'm curious about is that there's some point in the future in Vision where I want to open up your app in Vision and be able to click on something and be able to see it inside of that environment.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things that we're working on. And when I showed you sort of this screen, if I'm in some of the content here, and when you do click on this spatial video icon, that's when we really kind of start to see some things opening up.
Yeah.
And that icon only shows up if the content in the library was shot with spatial. There's no,
Correct.
At this point, spatialization of original content.
No, and you could even see, we're showing the proper icon for spatial content. You could even go and sort. So when you're filtering through, I have 3D objects here. I have spatial video. I can just search for video. So these are different elements. But yeah, if you're in here, let's see if I can pull up a project here. So let's just do some wind turbine footage that I've got on my computer here. Very sexy stuff. This is just this is a standard file, so you can see that there is no spatial video support for that.
Okay, nice. We have some questions starting to come in, so let's see what our audience is interested in.
First one's coming in from Dave Troutman in Edmonton, Canada. Can you speak a little about the forthcoming content provenance processing you're developing? This sounds very forward-looking.
Excellent
so it's funny because we talked a lot about this at NAB in 2022. So this was a precursor to a lot of the stuff that we were thinking about in terms of blockchain and how we were going to really have verifiable content ownership. And I personally, come from the agency world, so I know what it's like having even just likenesses of an actor or actress, right? So there's all of this provenance that happens, and especially now with generative AI, what is shot by a human and what's not shot by a human. So we were on this path of developing a content provenance, and we actually were going to give it away. It was going to be an open source product that we wanted to kind of share with the world. We ended up going with C2PA last year because I saw them as sort of the front runner, and also it would accelerate our time to market significantly when it came to content provenance. And I'm actually really excited. I just saw Google, I think it was this morning, is now adopting it for their AI that they're generating, and OpenAI also adopted it for DALL-E a couple weeks ago as well. So I'm particularly excited about the fact that I would be able to upload content, and if it was developed or created on a device that had C2PA infused in it already, I would be able to have that showing and be able to verify that content within Alteon. It really comes in handy when you start thinking about versioning. I also get excited about it for news. We're going into an election cycle right now. What is something that was shot by a real human, and what's something that was generated via AI that looks so real that you can't really discern the difference? So, I see news operations really kind of leveraging this type of software or this technology in order to go out and verify what content they're receiving from outside people.
Hey, I just realized that when we jumped into this, we always have new people coming in every show, and there may be some people out there to understand kind of the scope of what Alteon does. Can you explain a little bit about the back end of what Alteon is here to provide for people?
Yeah, so essentially, Alteon came out of my couple decades of experience of being in the production industry, and there wasn't a content management system or a thin layer between the cloud and users. And if there was, it was always a bespoke system that one of the top broadcasters or one of the top studios was developing for themselves. I kind of went into this idea of let's democratize the space. Let's get it into a point where every user or every creator would be able to have access to a central system that wasn't breaking the bank. Our lowest price tier of getting into Alteon is $12 a month. And that comes with 250 gigs of storage. So really kind of getting this intro into storing your content, collaborating with other people in the cloud, having a tool that you can comment on this footage. If I go in again, I'll sort of share my screen here. I have all of my assets available to me. And, we're project based. So when I go into this project, I see all of my assets here. I have various folders that I can develop. And then I can go in and again, that commenting tool, I can easily add some comments here. So if, I'm talking to an editor, start, edit, that comes up in real time, and everyone that's collaborating on this asset also has accessibility to that. The other thing is I wanted to make it accessible for people that didn't have an Alteon account. I know that sounds sort of counterintuitive, if you will, but if I wanted to share this asset with anyone on this call right now, I could allow them to download the original or the proxy because we're generating proxies in the cloud. It is a H.265. And then we could also allow for commenting or approvals. Again, approvals are really good if you're a social media influencer, let's say, and you're about to post something online for your client. This is a really great way of versioning and making sure that you're not posting the wrong version when the client hasn't reviewed it or when it's still in a review. The other thing that I personally think is a really cool feature is the ability to request uploads. So many times I would be on a shoot where I would hire a freelance camera guy or a sound person, and I would want to get that footage from them, and it was, well, what's your address? I'll just FedEx you a hard drive or whatever it was. And this way I can actually share a upload request from anyone who doesn't have an Alteon account. They can get a landing page that directly links in a secure way to this particular project. And it's really easy. It's really seamless. And again, the whole approach here was making it sort of an extension of your creative workflow so that you weren't having to fumble through different technologies and go to 5 or 6 different single purpose apps and really encapsulating everything into one. We do have extensions for Adobe Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro. We're working very closely with those teams and those companies to really ensure that we're, up to the latest developments that they're releasing within their software platforms. And it's just been an exciting journey for me personally, because I always joke that this is the company that I would have subscribed to if I was still running a creative agency.
You mentioned video. We're talking about video a good little bit, but what about audio and graphics and those kind of things? Does this system allow for that?
Yeah, good point. We do store any kind of files except for exe. Executable files tend to have viruses or harmful material in them,
sense.
so we block that. But really, you can upload any footage there. We are working with some people this year on expanding out our audio capabilities. So, kind of adding in a little bit there. And then, Alex, you and I know some really great streaming people. And I've been talking to them about potentially infusing their software into ours as well. So
Alex, do you have another thought?
True camera to cloud or device to cloud, let's say, or being able to play back content in sort of 4K HDR.
Alex, did you have a follow-up?
And how do you see your app evolving with something like the Vision Pro? Since we're talking about the Vision Pro a little bit, how do you see that affecting your interface, how people interact with the content, et cetera?
Well, the interface stays the same because they ripped us off. But no, I'm kidding. No. I'm really excited about it. I think that for me personally, the days of having multiple monitors or having to continue to purchase a giant display, I think that they're over. And I think you're spot on that it's really hard to want to watch TV or anything on a standard TV when it looks so great inside the Vision Pro. I would also stress, I'm now in a capability of being anywhere and having my entire work life set up in that spot. Casey Neistat published a video the other day on his review of it. And I thought it was really interesting to point out that, he went into it, and he admitted this at the end of the video, that, he kind of went into it as a goof. He was kind of fooling around, and he was walking down the streets of New York and doing his typical thing. And then there was a moment at the end where he was like, wait a second, no, like, this is a legitimate computer. And I think that's one of the things that we haven't discussed enough, is that this is a computer. This is a device that I'm now able to bring anywhere I want, attached with screens, or windows, if you will, that I can place in any space that I want. And I think that workflow is going to really increase for people. I'm still a fan of, though, having a keyboard, though.
Well, I think that one of the things I was thinking about with your USDZ support, and this is something, because one of the apps that I find to be the most interesting, I do a lot of training, and I've been doing skills training specifically for the last 35 years. And so what I focus on tends to be, how do you train people to do things? And one of the things that I opened up immediately was Jigspace, which is this, you can kind of build these step-by-steps, and then it'll save those step-by-steps, and you can just hit next, and it opens it up, or it'll pull apart an F1 racer, or show you some operation or whatever. Then you can rotate it around, you can grab things and pull them apart. And but one of the things that is that my mind kind of blew up when I started playing with it is the ability to annotate in 3D. So basically, what you're able to do is, I'm looking at this pinion, or I'm looking at a piece, and I can circle it, and then I can say, and I can also put an arrow going like, this is the force that's going here. So if I was a teacher or something, and when you walk around, that annotation is still attached to that object as if it was there. And so when you scale it up and down, it'll stay with it and everything else. And I felt like when I was thinking about you coming on the show, I was thinking about it'd be really cool with USDZ to be able to do the annotations that we're used to in 2D, but within 3D objects.
Yeah, that is something that we are certainly working on. And, I would even take it a little bit further in terms of being able to create little sort of almost minority report sections of, what I'm looking at. So if I want to keep all of my content open over here in all of the different clips that I have or assets that I have, and then whenever I'm clicking on one, another screen opens over here, almost like modals that we would use on a standard 2D display. These are all things that we're discussing, and my team, or my head of product came from Magic Leap, so it's kind of a natural fit there.
Yeah, it feels like you could be on a Zoom call to your right, so you're talking to someone about it. You're both looking at these things. You're bringing things up and selecting them, and it feels like it's going to be a really something that we now have to constantly try to figure out how to funnel into a single 2D screen, and that's going to open up a lot.
Well, yeah, and I think it's very similar to what Figma has done. I think Figma has done a really great job. We use it a lot. Where if I highlight a person on my team and I'm tracking their mouse, and if they're zooming in or out of an object, I'm actually seeing that on my screen. So I think the same thing can really apply for this. And I personally also really like the idea of sharing a session with somebody, where if an editor is hitting play on their edit system, everyone at the same time is hitting play at the same time, and it's streaming in that perspective.
When I watched the Casey Neistat video, it was interesting to me, that aha moment, which you could kind of see him go through, struck a chord in me, and I said, this is interesting. He's no longer going to an office, he's putting on an office. And that switch, I think, for people is going to be an interesting thing, probably requiring some, what's the right word for it, some structure in terms of, I don't want to live with my office on my head all the time. I need some guardrails about getting too immersed. What are your thoughts?
Let's just put it this way, right? My old office that I built, over a decade ago had an $80,000 Avid times 12, and we had a server that was attached to all of our edit suites, and the era also was, we had catering brought in for our clients, and we'd have a couch, and they'd sit there and they'd enjoy it, and then all of a sudden, Final Cut and Premiere became accessible on a laptop. And that laptop then meant my editors would say, hey, Matt, do I really have to come into the office today? Or could I work at this coffee shop down the street? Or, hey, I want to go on vacation this week. Can I just download all of the footage onto a hard drive and, edit that footage? That started happening over a decade ago. I don't think that because the Vision Pro now exists, this workflow hasn't evolved. I think that this is just a better iteration of it, just based on the fact that I don't have to see now people at coffee shops or sort of lobbies of hotels having those like slide out displays, that they attach to their laptop. Yes. I now have everything right there, and I think that's where it's going to create more efficiency for people.
Although I will tell you from experience, drinking coffee or anything in the Vision Pro is complex. Like there's a weird moment. There's a weird moment where the camera doesn't quite. You have to kind of get it to your mouth and then turn up, but do not start. Don't turn up too early. That's all I'm saying.
But except driving,
there's a parallax right at the bottom of your headset that you're just like it doesn't quite match up.
Except driving is fair game, right?
Sorry. Driving of course.
Driving is fair game.
That'll be fine. I'm sure. I can't imagine what would go wrong.
No issues there.
Cars with interlock, vision interlock.
I mean, we joke though, but again, the other thing that I think is really interesting about what Casey Neistat said, and I actually said something similar, I think back in June, this will be the worst version that Apple ships.
Yeah. They're known for ship, then iterate.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen this week alone a new beta of the OS that is available for download in Vision Pro.
And I fully see this as a soft launch. Like they put a lot of PR into it, but this is a soft launch. We're going to see twice as many features, I think, between now and June or July than what we have now. I think that things are going to build up, very, very quickly. And again, 2 years from now, I think we're going to see a headset that has 50% more resolution and 50% more frame rate. And, those are all things that, so you're absolutely right. And even now in this current version, I was talking about it, I think on a show, but on Sunday I was working and I was looking at stuff and I found myself using YouTube for a while. And there was a moment where I suddenly realized I went to reach for something and I said, oh, I'm in my headset. I had been sitting here for a while and it just had stopped thinking about it being another thing. And then on the other side of that, I find myself every once in a while looking at something and going like this and realizing, oh, I'm not in my head. I'm not in the headset. So I find that blend is, I think subconsciously that blend is much different. And I don't have that experience I have a Meta that I still use. And I don't find that experience. Like when I'm in the Meta headset, I'm in the Meta headset. I don't have a kind of this blended experience.
We have a couple more questions coming in. Let's go to the next one.
Alex 4D Gollner in Zone 2, Northwest London. Spatial video. What makes Apple's definition more than simple stereo video? Shouldn't spatial video be a cloud of clips with alpha channel information with 3D position metadata, with all composited at the point of playback? What's your definition?
Magic. I don't know. I think that what Apple has done is really optimize it. Obviously, they do that with anything that they ship or anything that they do. I've actually looked at the video shot in spatial, like even on my iPhone. It's 1080, but it looks so good in terms of the way that things are being displayed or rendered, things like that. I think that the world still has to evolve. I think that we're still just so early in all of these things. And I heard you guys talking about this on the call or on the show earlier today, where it's like, what about streaming? Right? What if I want to experience a sports event, or what if I want to experience anything live in true spatial? These are all evolving right now as we speak. And I think that we saw Panasonic and Sony try to come out with 3D a decade ago, and it just flopped. I mean, it just completely wasn't there. And I think that largely a lot of it was how people were going to watch the content. Quite frankly, now there's a device or multiple devices, right? It's not just Apple, it's Meta, and they announced, spatial video, I guess, a couple of weeks ago as well. I think that when we think about this, it's a very much so evolutionary process. For me, the way that I like to sit is sort of in the nucleus of all of these things that are happening around us, and constantly repositioning our software or our product to be able to take advantage of whatever the latest, greatest technology that's out there.
Yeah, I uncovered my original iPhone 1 a while back in a box in the closet, and it was like, whoa, the distance that this has developed over the course of that and the utility that it's developed since then is just almost unimaginable. It's been such a journey. So hopefully this will be the same thing. Let's go to the next question.
Dave Troutman from Edmonton, Canada has a question for you. Your marketplace idea seems to be a great one for a guy like me. Will it handle my payments through my membership?
Yes. So the concept of the marketplace actually came out of the fact that we have several software developers that we are talking to on a regular basis. I'm friends with several people in the industry that are all developing their own applications. And kind of what I referred to earlier is that Alteon really is that source of being able to take single purpose apps and create one ecosystem. And when we started talking to a couple of these app developers, it was, hey, we're going to have to really build a structure or workflow to be able to bring in XYZ application or an AI tool or a music library, things like that. And it was constantly creating this bespoke environment for them to come and for our users to be able to consume their product. So we essentially created over the last probably 9 months this concept of a marketplace, and it's still evolving. So we're really kind of getting the fine-tuned details right now. And that release in December was really kind of a call to all developers to have conversations with us. And we have had several dozen over the last couple of weeks where what is that container? What are those connection points that we need to create at Alteon to really streamline that whole process? So it does act as a little bit of an app store within Alteon. And the other component to it is when we're working with corporations, a lot of times they have a PO for Alteon, let's say. So an enterprise client has an account on Alteon. They might not be able to go and spend $1,000 on an AI tool just because it's too low for them to really have to go through the whole procurement process, get them onboarded, things like that. So allowing those users to have access to it within Alteon will actually streamline that process for them and actually get them access to that tool. So if this individual wants to reach out to me, if they have a application, I'd love to talk to them at some point.
Yeah, payment seems like it'd be an interesting thing. Next question.
Alex 4D Gollner from Zone 2, Northwest London. Is interactivity important to the future of immersive digital storytelling?
I'm trying to think of how to phrase that question. I'm sort of stumped here.
Well, I wonder if he's talking about like the choose your own adventure kind of things where you're in a world and you're going to choose your own part of the story. That's a guess off the top of my head about what Alex might be imagining.
I think it's, again, user preference. I personally, when I watch content for enjoyment purposes, I don't want to think, I don't want to choose an adventure. I want somebody to present that story or that narrative to me. I do think certainly that having a 3D experience or spatial experience does help in the context of being able to witness something in your own sort of scenario. I've been to, Sleep No More in New York or Secret Cinema in London a few times, where it is very much so a choose your own adventure. I certainly think that evolving into Vision Pro or MetaQuest is there, and I think that's kind of probably what Disney's even hoping for with their recent announcement.
Yeah, and gamification. I mean, obviously people spend gazillions of hours in gameplay where they get to choose their own path through things. Alex, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting from a content management perspective from Alteon, because I think I don't know if the Choose Your Own Adventure is ever really going to work, but I think that layering content on top of things is going to be a big deal. Where I go, like, I'm watching a movie, but I might want to explore that space, and there's a little, I think I often think we've talked about it a little bit. But they're the kind of the White Rabbit version of the Matrix DVD that we all watched, where there's something, little icon pops up while I'm watching it, and I go, oh, I can walk around this space, or I can see the space. And I might not do it when I watch the first time I watch the movie, but I might want to go and look at that set, or maybe look behind the scenes, look at those things. But I think from a content management perspective, we have to figure out how do we branch all that, right? And like how do we have, like, here is the core, and then here are the branches of things that might be connected to each one of those clips or scenes.
And that's where a content manager does come into play. I think, being able to have that tree or the, 100 iterations of something all accessible to the users, it definitely does lend itself.
And people are getting used to that. I mean, if I'm watching a YouTube video or something like that, I know I can hit a couple of keys and bring up what are the actors in the scene, what are the, additional information that helps me appreciate that, particularly if I'm not completely lost in the story, which is maybe the wrong thing because you'd hope to be completely lost in the story and don't want any more information. Let's go on to the next question.
Albie Lopez from San Antonio, Texas. I'm a user of Alteon since last time you were on office hours. I enjoy the product. Any chance or change of the login options? Could there be an alternative? Authenticator codes, Paskeys. Phone number is not the best for some clients I try to recommend this to.
They must be in the know on things because we just altered our login this morning. It was a new release that just got started. So it's an iterative process, but we did change some of our login procedure. You'll see a new UI for that popping up this morning, and that is to start to allow for passkeys and some other process there for two-factor authentication. So they are spot on with their question in the sense that we just did that this morning.
Was there anything else about the new release that people might look for, your already existing customers?
Just updates. It's standard updates, but the login was one of the bigger ones that we did start. And like I said, it is a very iterative process to get things out, and we constantly are testing before we release, and so we'll do it in stages to make sure that we're not completely derailing or bogging the system down for people to not be able to use it.
As a user of software, thank you. It's nothing worse than an update causing issues. Let's go to the next question.
Ken Jordan from Surrey, Great Britain. How do you see USDZ and spatial video support changing the landscape of content creation and distribution, especially for creators focused on AR/VR experiences?
Look, again, I think it's the evolution of it. I look at content that I created 5 years ago, 10 years ago in VR, and it's the quality of it was not anywhere where we are today. I think that just even HEVC and some of these codecs that are being updated constantly, the quality is incredible. So I think that's where I see things. I really look at USDZ as sort of the new SVG. I don't know if that's the right way to completely put it, but if I'm creating content, even 2D content, and I have some sort of object in that 2D content. Again, being able to use a USDZ file, it just kind of streamlines that process to have that vectorization of things.
Let's go to, Alex, you had a comment.
Yeah, and I think that one of the big challenges, I mean, on what your opinion is here, but one of the big challenges is how good will it be? I think that one of the things that I've seen so far is that, a lot of the 3D content is not very compelling, and I know that it can be. The texturing and the geometry is capable in the headset, but what we're seeing is, people who are paying attention to an app and not paying attention to the quality of the 3D geometry. Or same thing, I mean, we saw James Cameron come out and started a revolution around 3D because he did Avatar and he shot it properly, and then everybody else kind of chopped it up and tried to make money with it and ruin the entire platform. So I think that's going to, I don't know what you think about that. I think that's the real danger right now.
Well, no, and like even a great example is I belong to a nonprofit, and they're building a big building here in South Florida, and giving a demo of the actual building and handing somebody a phone and saying, here, we're going to put the building on top of this tabletop and you'll be able to walk around it. It's a changing experience. I mean, it really is a very life-changing experience versus, hey, I'm going to show you a 3D render that's flat on your screen and you can't interact with it at all. So I think that there are several advancements coming. And again, a lot of this is only capable of being possible because of the chips that we're now having in our phones or in our devices that can render it on the fly so quickly.
Alex?
If you can say, how far out do you think Alteon is in being able to have a shared space so that there's 3 or 4 people looking at a 3D object and talking about it in the middle of a virtual desk that's between all of them?
I'm not quite sure if it'll be this year, but I would say on the horizon.
Yeah.
With this kind of resolution, too, I thought, and I mentioned this the other day on the show, things like surgical training and things where this level of precision in a set of virtual vision tools should be transformative. I can't imagine this not being a huge thing for people who are working in anything where you're looking through a microscope or, yeah.
This is the line, though, that I think gets blurred sometimes with, this is such an incredible product, right? And we're all obviously blown away by it. A lot of this has been in the medical industry, but it would be a $100,000 or $200,000 device. It's been there for a couple of years, right? So we're now, as the mainstream audience, starting to witness the advancements in technology. Magic Leap has been doing things for years that arguably has been sort of the front runner in a lot of this. And when I look at it, it is really hard for us. Now that we have access to these tools, it's like, sure, we want to do all these things, but is it the right time to do that? And I think it's just pretty cool what we're seeing.
Absolutely. It's a peer into a future over the horizon. And I think a lot of people are so excited about this because you know that if you can master some of these techniques and tools and technologies now, that may bode very well for your future employability and just how you do your work. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, you talk about content provenance as a response to generative AI. Do you think it's a responsibility of the AI platform operators like OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and the rest to build their models so they can't be abused to create inappropriate content?
Ooh, small question there, Matt.
That's a loaded one. Look, I don't know about inappropriate content. I think that if content creators want to create content, they create content. I think it's a shame to see some of these deep fakes that are happening out there with, very famous people and inappropriate content with their faces on it. That I think could be potentially guarded a little bit more, especially when you start to talk about provenance. I also think that the world has become a little bit too open into anyone can do anything and then publish it out there and be completely anonymous about it. I think having some layer of provenance on those files to really get back to, who created this, I think that it creates a little bit more accountability. Again, whether that's right or wrong, I'm not the judge here. But I would say, one of the things that we've been debating even internally, and we've been talking to some of our friends about this is it the right point to create the provenance of the file once it hits the cloud or in the device? So that's one of the things that we keep kind of discussing internally. And again, if you have a legacy device, so let's say you have an old Barrycam or something like that, I'm not going to be able to create a digital provenance on that camera because it just didn't exist at the time when that camera was invented. But is it the right time to apply it once it hits the cloud? So these are some of the debates that we're having internally.
Yeah, that's been around for a long time too. I was really surprised. I've told this story before, but I shot one of my first videos on the 5D Mark II and did some editing on it, uploaded it to the cloud, left it there for a while, downloaded it later, and I went looking at the metadata, and sure enough, cameraman, my name was in there because I had stuck it in the original camera. So this idea of provenance and being able to follow some kind of a digital ID tag is very important now, but it's not new. It's been happening for a long time.
I think it actually is absolutely essential, though, for anything AI to have a digital watermark on it that says this was generated via AI.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are coming around to that feeling because you're just seeing so much realism and so much fakery that's possible so easily by somebody just with modest tools, and that's going to mean a huge group of people, not all of which are going to be. I mean, not
as a total sidetrack here, but I was in a talk yesterday, and somebody was discussing humanoid sort of robots, right? Androids. And let's say China develops these humanoid robots that get shipped to the U.S. Do they need a visa?
Ah, interesting.
They're coming in, they're taking a job, they're doing certain things. It was really kind of fascinating. Like, do you need to know which robot is which and where it lives and where it came from and all this? I mean, it's kind of like this weird paradigm shift that we're going into right now with technology.
Yeah. Fascinating. Let's get to the next question.
Alex Gollner is back with a question. Speaking as someone who creates motion graphics clips that are placed within videos, comments usually have irrelevant timecode. The parent video timecode. Can Alteon determine the timecode in my Apple Motion project that the feedback applies to?
Not yet on Apple Motion, but in terms of video clips, we are frame accurate. So I will stress that. And then if you're using Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere Pro, you can see the locator mark on that timecode location, and even who made the comment. So a lot of times, especially if I was editing something back in the past, I would want to know which producer made that comment so that I could ask them a question about whatever it was that they were asking me to do.
From your seat, Matt, what are you most excited about that you're seeing happen out there in anything on your horizon?
So much. I mean, I think that, again, it's just this democratization, and we were kind of joking about it before, even with the medical side of things, right? It's this accessibility that we now have. I think that's the coolest component to all of this. I remember in sort of grade school, even going back that far, my school had a camera, and then I remembered, like, our family got a camera, and now all of a sudden I'm at home and I'm able to use a camera that is really incredible. So when I look at sort of where we're going in technology, it's just accessibility is the biggest component to where I think I'm getting most excited, and also just the way that people are using these tools. I think it's creating a whole new breed of people that are getting excited about sharing their voice, sharing their vision. I mean, look at what YouTube and social media and all of these platforms have done for better or for worse, right? But people are going out there and expressing themselves in incredible ways that once were only capable of being expressed because you were a major advertiser spending $1 million on a commercial or developing a TV show. And now we're seeing narratives being developed for content. I was listening to a podcast one day, and it was the CEO of Netflix talking about that they'll actually produce shows for like a 200,000 person audience, which kind of sounds crazy being Netflix, but it's like they want to get this niche audience really into something that they're interested in. And, I think being able to share those viewpoints, that's the most exciting thing about technology these days.
Yeah, and advertising. I remember we talked about demographics a lot, and all of a sudden everybody was talking about psychographics. It's not how many people are watching, but who the people are that were watching. I also had a friend a long time ago who was a video producer, and I said, "Well, you've been working on it?" He said, "Well, I can't talk about it, but I'll give you a hint. I'm making training videos that go into a product that is so expensive that someone is maybe going to buy one once every 10 years. But that product has such an incredible margin that they will pay me whatever I want in order to make one video for one person buying this incredibly expensive product." That was not as reasonable before people got a hold of these individual tools. Now it's, the stratification of potential markets for somebody to be able to get into a place and make video, particularly something like this where you can tour and see reality and interact with it, I think is going to be potentially transformative for a lot of people who want to make a living doing this.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I developed Alteon, right? I was sitting in this space where I was looking at what Avid had, which was great, by the way, but I needed a couple $1 million to get into it. Or, when I went to, some of these other content management systems that existed out there, it was, well, great, I've got to spend a year with a team of developers to put something together where I'm using all of these services, where by the time it was done, I was spending millions of dollars on. It was great, and it did exactly what I needed to do. But once I turned on the key, it was like, well, I have to keep adding fuel to it because I'm running this engine and I'm constantly updating it. So me as a production company have now become a technology company. And, that's not what I wanted to focus on. And that's really where the genesis of Alteon came, was let's let us do that, for creators. And we all are creatives on the team and, the product team and everything else. So we truly get into it from the perspective mindset that, hey, would we want to use this? Yes.
And also, we've talked a lot on this show about how many of us who came out of the video industry and have been in it for a long time saw the evolution of iPhones as a content acquisition device and came to one point where you go, oh my gosh, I can actually use this. I can leave the bigger cameras behind and get a satisfying, in fact, more than satisfying, a really incredibly watchable image off of the thing I'm carrying around with me every day. If I really put some time and effort into learning how to use that well, then I will be able to shoot wherever I am, whatever happens around me, and add a few more tools, and I can stabilize the shot and do all these other things. It really did change the way I communicate as somebody who's been working video professionally for a long time. It feels like this Alteon, this whole process is heading toward there again, where you keep saying democratization, and it seems really palpable to me that more people are going to be able to do this kind of communication than ever before if they learned.
Yeah, I mean, we always sell this as a tool that it's like I could be a TikTok influencer or a major corporation or studio and use Alteon. So it's such a wide range now. And I think that even if you look at a lot of the companies that exist out there today, they're starting to use consumer tools, right? They're starting to use an iPhone to go shoot stuff. I mistakenly have to catch myself every once in a while and saying, hey, when I use the camera, and it's like, oh, I mean the iPhone, I did, and it's just kind of this joke now. But yeah, I mean, you are spot on, Bill, and I think that, even when Apple came out with, log on the 15 Pro, like you're looking at this image quality that is just so superior. And I remember even when they came out with the spooky, scary, whatever thing that they did in October. And then at the end, it said shot on iPhone. I mean, the internet exploded with creatives being like, oh my God. I mean, granted, look, to be fair, they had a $1 million rig and gaffers and grips and everything else that were true production professionals that were able to make this look really pretty and color grading and all that other stuff. But the fact that it was still shot on iPhone, I think, is a really incredible achievement.
Well, that's always been the process of this. You always needed to do something to the raw signal coming out of the camera. But you're right. When Apple did the keynote on this, it said that if you have those resources and want to just swap out this for a camera, that production pipeline can look as good as anything else that's being done right now. I do think that was a little bit of a watershed. And that's not to say for anybody who's listening, thinking if you just buy the latest iPhone, you're suddenly going to become a cinematographer. That's as crazy as thinking if you buy a Bosendorfer piano, you suddenly become a concert pianist. It doesn't work that way. You have to have the skills first.
And I would stress one last thing there too is, when you think about journalism, it's now this moment that's happening right here in front of me unfolding. I can shoot it and it'll still be broadcast quality versus I've got to wait for the helicopter to show up or I've got to wait for the camera person to show up in order to capture the event that's happening and unfolding in front of me.
Book the Bell Jet Ranger with the Tyler mount because we need to get some good footage. And now everything has changed in that respect. Interesting times we live in. Matt, it is always so good to talk to you about this stuff. I hope we can get you to come back over and over again and let us know kind of what you're seeing in the point of a developer. Anything that you haven't talked about today that you'd like to chat about?
Nothing that I can talk about, but yes, I really am excited for the future, and also NAB. It's kind of hard to imagine that that's right around the corner, but we will be there, and looking forward to seeing people there, and hopefully we'll all be able to connect very soon.
Well, Office Hours is going to do a presence there, so you'll definitely see a few of us running around there. And also WWDC is, it's a bit away, but it's going to be really fascinating to see what Apple announces, shows, promotes during their developer conference, which always kind of gives you an idea of where they're headed. And obviously, 3D Spatial Vision Pro, this is going to be a big kind of tentpole from that. So absolutely appreciate your being here today. Thank you very, very much for being around. As always, thank you all for paying attention and watching us today. Our producers who have asked the questions that drive our show every day, the panelists who gather together to add their expertise and make this all possible, our amazing back-end crew, unbelievable number of professionals scattered all around the world who come together every day to produce these kind of programs. It's an amazing crew of people, and we're very proud to be able to work with all of them. The Talak traversal today, if you were to go get to the people who showed you this information, 82,000 miles would have been on your travel itinerary. That's 132,000 kilometers and 651 million bananas for scale. Thanks for watching. After Hours is open now.
Thanks, man.
Thank you
great
guys
job
so
again.
much.
It's always fun to talk to you.
No, it's always great talking to you. And I didn't get to joke about the rip in the space-time continuum when I saw you and Bill Davis at Apple back in November.
It's only happened twice.
I'm like, I have Bill Davis here and Bill Davis here. This is just...
For some reason in my head, I had them as related. And I was like, and I was talking to Bill. He's like, no, it's just, and I was like, how can you have one person that's really into Final Cut and then someone on the Final Cut team? And they both have exactly